Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another late night conversation, a little bit of a different style tonight, but it'll be good. I'm glad that you all are here. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I am absolutely pumped, but I am also very tired. I have had a very busy day. I was on RT a lot, and I had to run out to Queens to get... Here it is. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of this. My living room is full of boxes. I went out to Queens, and yeah, there are many, many, many copies of the pamphlet here. And I'm very, very happy about it. And tomorrow night, me and Peter are loading up, and we're heading to DC, and we're going to be distributing these pamphlets at the Libertarian Party convention on Saturday. Carl the Trinket Man, my hat off to you for your help. Peter Coffin, John McCarthy, everyone who helped make this happen. Steve, the layout guy who did this beautiful cover design. Wow, we did it. We did it. And here it is. This pamphlet is finished, and I feel so happy about it. Do you believe in growth? That is the name of the pamphlet. Do you believe in growth? Why Russia and China keep rising while U.S. society stifles innovation. So it's very good, and I'm very happy that we have it. It's been a long day. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm happy. I'm happy that we have this pamphlet. And so basically what I decided to do for tonight, since I'm pretty tired, is I am going to read the pamphlet to you and show you the pictures. I'm just going to read this to you for my opening remarks. That will be what I do. That's what I'm going to do for tonight. If you have any super chats, I will answer them afterwards. Not sure how long it is going to take me to read this, but I will. I will read it. I will read it. And then I will do the roll call, and then after that, I will answer your super chat questions. And then I'm going to bed because I'm exhausted. I have a headache, and I got to be up early in the morning because I got another full day and packing up to DC. And yeah, this is for real, folks. And I am very, very happy because I feel like the message in this pamphlet, I mean, I wrote it for the most part, but I mean, Peter made some amazing edits and contributions, a lot of very helpful feedback from Carl the Trinket Man and others. And we really put together something special here. This is a collective effort, and this is the message that I very much want to get across to people right now. This is what people in America need to read, specifically libertarians, specifically conservatives, specifically the bulk of America that is not impressed with the whole woke thing. But even the woke people could read this. This is what humanity needs to read. I must say, I am very thrilled. This printer that we found, you might spend thousands of dollars printing 100 of these, but we got a very good deal. And I'm very happy about that. And we've got many, many of these to distribute. And I hope that this is the first of many printings. I hope that we reprint this over and over again, and we just saturate all political spaces with this. Now, we're going to be putting out a book version for Amazon. This is only a 41-page pamphlet, but we've got a couple other pieces that we're going to add to it and make like a full-length book version that'll go on Amazon. But this is what we're mass producing this for distribution, and it is a pamphlet. I thought it would be saddle stitched with staples, but it ended up being a small sized book, which, hey, for the price we got, that's tremendous. So I'm very, very grateful to the printer. So as I said, if you guys have anything you want me to answer, any super chat questions, by all means, send them in, and I will answer them after the roll call. Same for Rumble rants, obviously. And I am just going to read this pamphlet from beginning to end, so that you know what is in it, because I think this is a great contribution. I'm thinking we're probably going to add the text to the CPI website and the PDF, so you can download it and print it yourself if you want. This is what people need to hear, and this is the CPI message put concisely into one place. So I am, and it's intended for mass distribution. I got boxes and boxes of them. My living room is full of cardboard boxes, and this is really great. So, all right, here we go. Here we go. Do you believe in growth? Why Russia and China keep rising while U.S. society stifles innovation. A message from the Center for Political Innovation. And keep in mind the super chats, keep them rolling in. I will answer people's questions at the end. So there we go. Growth is good. This should be common sense. It is completely healthy and normal to want to see things improve in your life. It is completely healthy and normal to want a more comfortable life, to provide better for your family, to see things in your community get better, and to take pride in your achievements. Growth isn't just about money. Sure, seeing a rise in your income is great, but growth is about much more than that. Human beings are tool-making creatures. While other species merely interact with their environment, we force the environment to serve us. The whole history of humanity is a story of constantly reinventing our relationship with nature and reaching a higher plane. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. Beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. But in just 7,000 or 8,000 years, human beings have gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel, iPhones, and artificial intelligence. Humanity is a creative species, constantly striving to expand its population, lengthen its life expectancy, and make living conditions more comfortable. Growth defines humanity. So why does it seem like a contrary message is being blasted everywhere these days? Why does despair, hopelessness, and pessimism seem to be seething throughout Western civilization? Why is degrowth suddenly trendy? What has gone wrong? There's one section of the world where growth is everywhere. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres remarked, "Every time I visit China, I am stunned by the speed of change and progress. You have created one of the most dynamic economies in the world while helping more than 800 million people lift themselves out of poverty. The greatest anti-poverty achievement in history. Since 1949, 850 million people have been lifted from poverty. 70% of the world's poverty reduction has been achieved by the Communist Party of China. China has high-speed trains that can go over 200 miles an hour. China continues to send spacecraft to the far side of the moon to retrieve samples used in fusion energy research, paving the way to a higher energy source than fossil fuels. We have a graphic here of one of the high-speed trains in China. China is centralizing its fusion energy research with the goal of creating the industrial prototype fusion reactor or artificial sun by 2035. China is not alone. Despite devastating sanctions and attempts to isolate the country, the IMF admits that Russia's economic growth continues to expand. Oil exports have held steady, and the state is using oil revenue to expand the industrial base. Russia is experiencing an agricultural boom, now the leading exporter of wheat. Russia responded to sanctions imposed by in 2014 by rebuilding its farming system. The Economist proclaimed in 2018, Russia has become an industrial and an agricultural powerhouse. The growth continues. By 2030, the production of Russia's agricultural sector is expected to increase by at least 1/4 compared to 2021, while exports should rise by half, the Russian president recently explained. Russia is also supplying fertilizer to African countries. The explosion of growth that is happening in Russia and China is going global. In October of 2023, a publication of Boston University described China's global infrastructure projects, quote, "Go big or go home." Just go big or go home. That seemed to be the mantra of China's decade-long effort to finance infrastructure projects around the world. An airport in Pakistan, a high-speed train line in Indonesia, a port in Ethiopia, Africa's longest suspension bridge in Mozambique. The article went on to explain, between 2013 and 2021, China provided at least $331 billion in financing to an array of countries, largely in the global south. African countries have received $91 billion. The Center for Strategic and International Studies described Russia's expanding economic relationship with Africa. Trade revenue between Russia and African countries almost doubled from $9.9 billion in 2013 to $17.7 billion in 2021. Grain exports are of particular importance, as nearly 30% of Africa's grain resources come from Russia. Moscow's leading trade partners in the region are countries in North Africa, particularly Egypt, Algeria, and Morocco, which together account for approximately 67% of Russia's total trade with the continent. Moscow mainly exports wheat, coal, refined petroleum, and electronics to these states, while importing fruits, sugar, and vegetables. Aysel Toji of the Norwegian Nobel Institute contrasted the pessimism and confusion rising in the West with the explosion of growth and optimism happening in the East. In the West, the current times are often seen as a time of uncertainty and fears. This is Aysel Toji. This agonizing over the future. And we often forget that for many others, especially on the Eurasian continent, this is a golden era. And in the Eurasian continent, we're seeing a lot of power accumulating. We're seeing roads, cities, train networks snaking through the post-Soviet wilderness and creating a fabulous amount of wealth and dynamism. And this is also happening globally. We are living through a time of great technological progress, a time of engineering marvels that have been unsurpassed by human history. This short booklet will help you understand the problem and what can be done about it. And in the first section, let's talk about woke. And the caption with this picture is, over the past decade, the rise of a certain pessimistic worldview, commonly called woke, has become hard to ignore. And we've got a woke person screaming. Let's talk about woke. There is a group of very obnoxious people in society these days, and many of us find them very annoying. They always want to remind you of how good they are. Whatever the latest trendy social media cause is, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Stop Trump, abortion, transgender rights, you can be sure that they are all over it. While these issues might genuinely matter to them individually, at the widespread level, we're talking about the primary driving factor is being good, correct, and beating everyone else. And so they really want you to be wrong. They hope to discover that you are somehow a bad person. Talking to them is frightening because they listen to every word you say, hoping to correct you, and thus prove themselves to be better. In their minds, being a good person means constantly exposing, denouncing, and disavowing others. The more they call out others, the better they feel about themselves. But their obnoxious traits go beyond excessive political correctness. They often have needlessly large amounts of body piercings, gaudy hair colors. They classify themselves as some obscure sexual or gender identity and openly discuss mental health issues. Being different is fine, but doing anything and everything specifically to inflict oneself onto others is not simply being different. But to be different is to be good. And how will anyone know if no one can see it? Their desire to prove their goodness is compounded by a self-indulgent quest to advocate for their unique identity and experiences like religious mission work. They believe no one has ever suffered as they have, and they constantly seek to win in what some jokingly call the Oppression Olympics. They see themselves as victims on a personal journey of rediscovering and discovering once again their victimhood. They believe being a victim is great because victims are good. Moreover, the victim label functions as moral justification for their expressions of rage, regardless of who is on the receiving end. However, their explosive rage is actually a way to cope with and mask a misanthropic hopelessness that's hiding just below the surface. When they're not exploring their perceived victimhood or lashing out at those who might they see as privileged, they view the world and their fellow human beings with contempt. They believe that there is no future, that the planet is boiling over, resources are running out, and it's human beings' fault. In their eyes, we are a cancer on the planet. They see the future as bleak. They believe they can prove their goodness by using low-flush toilets or riding bicycles instead of driving cars, to punish society and tell everyone what else they're doing wrong. They may even vandalize prominent works of art or scream into social media, but it doesn't do much good. All of this makes perfect sense if one believes that the future is dark and hopeless. This leads to a cycle: rage when you have the energy, and stew in self-doubt when you are too tired to rage anymore. And of course, there's always a great pastime to distract from self-hatred: drugs. Whether it's magic mushrooms, ecstasy, cocaine, opioids, marijuana, or just good old-fashioned alcohol. If they say they're going on a spiritual adventure to learn about themselves, it is definitely not a habit or a problem. If they end up harming themselves or committing suicide, it's seen as evidence of their oppression, garnering more sympathy from a world they believe doesn't understand their hardships. Apparently, we're all going to die anyway. There's no future for our racist settler colonialist civilization founded on preserving cisgender heterocentric patriarchy. So why not just numb the brain and enjoy the ride? Perhaps the worst thing: nothing stokes their rage more than seeing people take care of themselves and striving to succeed or innovate. Exercise and physical fitness trigger them. People starting their own business or getting excited about new projects must be shut down. How dare these people be optimistic? How dare they be happy? How dare they not share the hopelessness and resentment that define their world? If someone is confident, fit, optimistic, happy, or working towards something good, they must be stopped. They must be labeled as fascist or somehow a bad person. Such people finding fulfillment in their lives, working to achieve goals, and having meaningful relationships with others cannot be allowed. Everything must be done to stop them at all costs. Yes, they are willing to suddenly collaborate with people they deem toxic, including the US government, the police, and the military, if it means shutting down some confident, happy person out there. If they can take down someone who exudes a different vibe, that is one of the most important victories that they can achieve. They might feel good for a day or even a week, but it's inevitably back to the same old hopeless cycle. It's not just about politics. That's the next section. We've all seen this type of person. It's not just about politics. It's a much deeper problem. It's a mindset that is being actively pumped out and cultivated at the highest levels. As people who want the best for ourselves, our families, our country, and our community, we are repelled by it. But if we are honest with ourselves, we have our own share of it inside. We all do. What makes us different from the pink-haired menace is that while they embrace it, we are fighting against it. It might be harder on some days than others, but we are actively trying to suppress this pessimistic, destructive, rage-filled, depression-prone sentiment. When we see the woke people, they horrify us. However, when they aren't attacking us or making our lives unpleasant, we have to admit we kind of feel sorry for them. They are useful in a way as a negative example. This is what we would become if we ever gave up the fight. If we surrendered to the part of our minds the social media apparatus and the richest and most powerful people are trying to pump out, we would be just like them, miserable, determined to make others miserable, repugnant, unpleasant, and hopeless. We don't want to be that, and we know that. As hard as it might be, we have made a commitment to ourselves not to be this way. We have realized that probably the most useful thing in not collapsing into this state of being is other people. We need our beliefs. We need our community. We need our family. As much as we might get annoyed with people around us, as much as we might disagree with them or be disappointed by them, we need them. We just need other people. We need something to believe in. Next section, Eurasia is rising. Everything cannot be a lie. Everything cannot be a fraud. Truth has to exist. And we need truth with which we can build, we can stand with other people, and with those other people, we need to build. We need to create. We need to perform. We need to beautify the world. We need to improve things. We need to help people. We need to feel a sense of satisfaction that comes from making a contribution. It's not about making money. It's not about getting a better reputation. It's about taking the world around us and exerting our effort to improve it. We want living standards for the people in our community to go up. We want the level of material comfort and technological advancement to increase. We want people to live longer and have more children. We want life to be easier and more comfortable. We want hope. We want community. We want truth. And we want growth. The mindset that you are struggling day in and day out to cultivate within yourself, optimism, creativity, and the willingness to work with other people to achieve it, is very much alive on the other side of the planet. When I attended the World Youth Festival in 2024 in Sochi, Russia, I met with members of the All China Youth Federation, the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union of Vietnam, student organizations from across the African continent, Russia's patriotic movement of the first organization, the Robert Serra Youth Movement of Venezuela, among others. What I heard was a different tone. I heard love for their countries, hope for the future, and a belief that humanity, a belief in the power of humanity to better its conditions and strive for a higher plane. Xi Jinping, China's president, recently proclaimed, "Whether the past, present, or future, Chinese youth have always been and will always be at the forefront of propelling the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation." Xi has referred to youth as the spearhead and vital forces in a wide range of projects crucial to the future of China and the world. He recently told students, "You should maintain firm ideals and convictions, work hard in study and training, hone your skills, and dedicate yourselves to serving as loyal guardians of the party and the people." And we have two great graphics in this section, one of the World Youth Festival and one of the youth of China. And this one here, it says, Russian President Vladimir Putin convened the World Youth Festival in Sochi in March of 2024, focused on tech innovation, expansion, economic expansion, and the new BRICS economy around the world. And the other one, in China, youth are being mobilized to be part of a project of national rebirth and expansion. And we got the next section here, technology and economic crisis. You are not alone in noticing that while significant parts of the world are progressing, there are significant issues in the West. Many people attribute this to some sort of conspiracy or cabal. Indeed, conspiracies do exist, and rich and powerful individuals often conspire among themselves to further their own conflicting interests. However, we assert that the challenges facing Western civilization are not rooted in the malicious intent of individuals. Instead, they are rooted in economics. Growth is beneficial, and technological development and growth should progress hand in hand. As technology advances, society's wealth should increase. Human beings should be able to move toward a more prosperous society with increasing abundance as technology diminishes the necessity for human labor. Yet, this is not the current reality. Consider self-driving cars, for instance. If car transportation could be entirely automated, it would be a positive development in a rational society. It would eliminate the chore of driving, allowing human labor to be utilized elsewhere. But that's not the society we live in. Andrew Yang explained it in this way, quote, "All you need is self-driving cars to destabilize society." He predicts that in a few years, quote, "We're going to have 1 million truck drivers out of work who are 94% male, with an average level of education of high school or 1 year of college. We have 5 to 10 years before truckers lose their jobs," he said, "and all hell breaks loose." Something that should bring more prosperity and abundance is threatening to bring massive economic disaster. As it becomes easier than ever to produce products in the age of 3D printers and significant technological breakthroughs, an age-old problem is emerging more prominently than ever: poverty amid plenty, or poverty created by abundance. There is a famous allegorical dialogue between a Polish coal miner and his son, and it goes something like this: "Son, why is it so cold?" "Father, because I cannot afford to buy any coal to heat the stove." "Son, why can you not afford to buy any coal?" "Father, because I lost my job at the coal mine. I was laid off. I am unemployed." "Son, why did you lose your job? Why were you laid off?" "Father, because there is too much coal." Why should people be hungry? Because too much food has been created. Why should people be homeless? Because too much housing has been produced. Furthermore, why is the Biden administration working with gigantic financial institutions like BlackRock and strategizing with the World Economic Forum to reduce global crop outputs amid a pending crisis of malnutrition in Africa? Why are tent city encampments springing up across our country in mass, with people becoming homeless, as millions of empty apartments and houses can be found everywhere? Furthermore, why is the rent and cost of housing increasing at the same time? We have an economic system in which the worker is never able to purchase what he produces. Let's say you own a tire factory. A represents the materials necessary to create the tire, such as rubber. B represents the costs of transporting the tires to where they are sold. C represents the human labor that is hired to assemble the tires. And D represents the final cost when it is purchased. Right? And then we have the mathematical equation there at the top. A plus B plus C equals D. Something is missing, of course. You, as the factory owner, need to make a profit. You cannot change how much the shipping costs. You cannot change how much the materials cost. You can only diminish the value put into the product by human labor. So the equation should properly read A plus B plus C1 plus C2 equals D. And there we've got the equation. A plus B plus C1 plus C2 equals D. C1 represents the wages paid out to the employees in the process of production. C2 represents the profit extracted from the labor value and taken as profit. The worker is never paid the full value of the labor he puts into the product. This is the basis for Marx's claim that the working class is exploited. Some might argue that the employer deserves compensation because he put up the money and he created the enterprise. This is a separate point that diverts from the real problem inherent in this transaction. Beyond any perceived unfairness, the problem is this: C1 is always less than D. C1 is always less than D. The worker is never paid enough in wages to purchase the product he produces. The wages paid out in the process of production are never enough to buy the products created. This is called overproduction or value crisis. The worker can never buy back what he produces. This is the basis of the boom-bust cycle. However, the problem becomes intensified by technological advancement. In order to increase their profits, the owners of industry are constantly looking to replace human labor with machines. Automation reduces labor costs. Corporations are competing with each other, trying to produce more efficiently and create more products. But this leads to a bigger problem. A plus B plus C equals D. A plus B plus C1 plus C2 equals D. If C, the human labor put into production, goes down, C2 decreases as well. The less human labor that is involved in the process of production, the less profit an employer can make. This is called the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, or the tendency of the falling rate of profit. It forces the corporation to turn out even more products to make up for the decreased rate of profit per item sold. These inherent problems in production organized for profit lead to a general rule of economic history, which is that when there is a huge leap in technology, the result is a long-term economic crisis. Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, observed this, quote, "Technology is scary. The first technology revolution caused World War I. The second technology revolution caused, or directly or indirectly, World War II. And now we are in the third technology revolution. What if a third world war? If human beings do not have the same enemy, we will fight among ourselves. I think all of those countries, China, Russia, USA, European, should share this technology, unite together to fight this war. And the enemy should be poverty. The enemy should be disease. And if this is the war, if we fight it together, young people will be much happier." Jack Ma also remarked that technological leaps in data technology and artificial intelligence can lead to a bright future and expansion of the spiritual and emotional existence, which really makes us human. Quote, over the past 100 years, we've made people like machines. Now we make machines like people. But the right way to do it is to make, over the next 10 to 20 years, a machine like a machine and people like people. A machine will never be able to conquer human beings. Machines are smart, machines are stronger and faster, but a machine does not have a soul. It does not have values, it does not have a belief that people have. So we should not make a machine think like a human being. We should make a machine learn like a human being. The next section is Imperialism, a global system of degrowth. We do not live in the era of individual factory owners selling their products. We live in the age of gigantic corporations tied in with banks, stretching their tentacles across the planet. The global system of trusts, cartels, and syndicates dominating the economy, not just in their home countries, but the planet itself, is called imperialism. Imperialism is defined by the dominance of financiers. The age of captains of industry like Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie is long gone. We now live in the era of bankers, and the primary way that the small clique of bankers that dominates the Western world today stays in power is by holding back economic development. While it would be normal for those who own businesses to want economic growth, the ultra-wealthy monopolists maintain their power by enacting degrowth. They want to impoverish the world and keep it poor so they can stay on top. The people of Mexico have been growing their food since before Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492. However, free trade policies of the North American Free Trade Agreement put an end to that. The Mexican farming sector has been eliminated. Mexico has been degrown, and Mexicans import their food from American agribusiness corporations. More than a century ago, the British Empire burned the vast textile looms of India and forced people who'd been weaving for centuries to import their cloth from Britain. No African country exports more oil at this time than Nigeria. The Niger Delta region is full of petroleum, one of the most vital commodities of our global economy. But the people of Nigeria live in utter poverty. The CIA World Factbook describes a life expectancy of only 60 for males and 64 for females, with 53.7 infant deaths per live births. Only 62% of the adult population is literate. How can a country with so much natural wealth remain so impoverished? The reality behind the global crisis is this. It is easier than ever before to churn out products. Human technology has created a more efficient process of production than ever before. The result is that millions of people have no place at the assembly line. The rate of profit for each product created has drastically decreased, and the billionaire financiers who run the world are in a desperate drive to degrow the world, reduce living standards, reduce the population, and demolish their international competitors in order to stay at the top. The countries targeted in U.S. wars are all countries that have broken out of this disastrous economic setup and refused to be captive markets. Until 2011, it was not Nigeria, but Libya that produced the most oil of any African country. Libya seized control of its resources in a popular revolution in 1969, led by Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent and built the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River, greening the desert with the goal of creating their own food. Africans from across the continent were trying to get to Libya to gain employment. However, in 2011, Libya was destroyed by a U.S.-backed revolution, in quotes. The country was forcibly degrown with NATO bombs. So at the top of the page, we've got a picture here of the Niger Delta region. Despite having a huge amount of natural petroleum wealth, the people of Africa's Niger Delta region live in extreme poverty. And then here we've got, in 2011, NATO reduced Libya, which had the highest living standard on the African continent, to rubble and chaos. Now the country is in ruin, with open-air slave markets and rival factions seizing territory, a lack of electricity, and economic devastation. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the country was economically demolished. Farms went bankrupt. Factories shut their doors. Naomi Klein's study, The Shock Doctrine, explained that by 1998, more than 80% of Russian farms had gone bankrupt, and roughly 70,000 state factories had closed, creating an epidemic of unemployment. The number of Russians living below the poverty line reached 74 million during the late 90s, with Klein writing that 25% of Russians, almost 37 million people, lived in poverty described as desperate. The rate of drug addiction increased by 900%, and the suicide rate doubled. As Russia was economically collapsing, the United States embraced it. Yeltsin and Clinton were noted for their close relationship, and U.S. media and documentaries bragged about all the U.S. meddling that made sure Yeltsin was reelected in 1996. The hatred for Russia in U.S. media began when Putin came into office and started restructuring their economy. Putin put Gazprom and Rosneft, two state-controlled energy giants, at the center of the economy. The inflow of oil and gas revenue into the state budget enabled Russia to rebuild its industrial sector. During the first 8 years that Putin was in power, industrial output increased by 125%. And the country had finally reached the levels of production and growth it had during the time of the Soviet Union. The Russian GDP increased from 764 billion to 2,096 billion between 2014 and 2017. The former CEO of British Petroleum, John Brown, observed, "No country has come so far in such a short space of time." With Russia once again a competitor, suddenly it became the object of scorn, demonization, and efforts to destabilize it from within yet again. China was the sick man of Asia before 1949. At the time that communists took power, China had very little electricity and not a single steel mill. However, today, China makes half of the world's steel. China has the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer, the world's fastest trains, the world's largest hydroelectric power plant. Xi Jinping explained, "It is an essential requirement of socialism to eradicate poverty, improve people's living standard, and achieve common prosperity among the people." And we have a picture of Xi Jinping greeting the Chinese youth. China is making huge breakthroughs on the road to fusion energy. It produces the majority of the world's electric cars. It has a vibrant and pioneering space program. After China's recent lunar launch, a French researcher named Pierre-Yves Meslin remarked, "It's a bit of mystery to us how China has been able to develop such an ambitious and successful program in such a short time." China was once a captive market, subdued by the British with 2 opium wars that prevented it from developing and building up its own economy. The China of the 1920s and 30s was one of mass starvation, illiteracy, sexual slavery, competing warlords, and drug gangs. But when China broke free, that started the process that led to creating what is now the second largest economy in the world, with 800 million people lifted from poverty. The imperialists want the world to be their impoverished captive market, but it is rapidly slipping out of their hands. The new economy emerging around the world with the BRICS is a threat to the monopoly of Wall Street and London. So they target it with sanctions, war, threats, and other schemes. The results of the US-backed regime change wars or revolutions speak for themselves. As bad as Saddam Hussein may have been, no one can argue that Iraq today is any better off. NATO bombing and destabilization of Libya has reduced the country to ruin. The civil war the U.S. fomented in Syria, hoping to topple the government, resulted in millions of refugees and the rise of the terrorist group known as ISIS. The U.S. occupation of Afghanistan was 20 years of chaos, with drug gangs and terrorist organizations getting stronger. From the fall of the Soviet Union to Hillary Clinton's 2009 coup in Honduras, never has the destabilization of a country in the name of human rights brought a better life or improvement for the country subjected to liberation. The goal is always achieved, beating down an independent country, helping secure the global monopoly for big Western bankers and their governments. Imperialism is all about degrowth, but they are bringing that degrowth home. What they once did to Africa, Asia, and Latin America, they are now doing to Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Alabama. The roads are crumbling. The water isn't properly purified. The power plants are in shambles. Obama, Trump, and Biden all promised to revamp the country's infrastructure, but they failed to deliver. The heartland is being hollowed out. Why? This is because the industrial middle class that once made America so prosperous is no longer needed. In the global high-tech economy, there is no need for a layer of well-paid auto workers, steel workers, and manufacturers in the imperialist homeland. The USA is rapidly collapsing into a low-wage police state. The inflow of migrants, the rise of government surveillance, the sinister schemes dreamed up by the World Economic Forum about how you will live in a pod, eat bugs, own nothing, and be happy about it, are all intended to save their dying system. Degrowth is not socialism. It is highly controlled capitalism in which the productive forces are destroyed and living standards are driven down in the hopes of stabilizing the system. One of the most blatant examples of the heavy-handed degrowth agenda of the U.S. state has been the repression of the Uhuru movement. And I have an image of Tucker Carlson speaking with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Tucker Carlson interviewed Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party about the brutal FBI raid on his home and how he's been indicted, facing a possible 15 years in prison. If one visits St. Petersburg, Florida, or St. Louis, Missouri, you will see a kind of Black community organizing that's very different than CNN's beloved Black Lives Matter mobs. The African People's Socialist Party and the People's Democratic Uhuru movement have built a farmers market, classes for pregnant mothers, basketball courts, and other services to facilitate economic growth in the Black community. They have condemned the government welfare programs that maintain a state of defeated impoverishment among Black people. And instead, they have pushed for the construction of a strong economy in Black neighborhoods and communities. And the response of the U.S. government to this effort to bring about growth in some of America's poorest regions has been FBI repression. The FBI stormed into the homes of Omali Yeshitela and other organizers across the country. Drones were flown in. SWAT teams kicked down doors. Chairman Omali described it this way. In St. Louis, my wife and I were in our dining room table preparing for her to attend a training session at the Uhuru House headquarters. Suddenly, a booming voice from the darkness startled us, instructing everyone to come out with their hands up immediately. The voice identified itself as the FBI, followed by explosions echoing through the neighborhood. As the explosions rattled the house, knocking plaster off the walls, it was initially difficult to believe the situation was unfolding. I asked my wife to stay upstairs while I went to investigate and inform others, but communication was jammed, leaving us isolated. Upon descending, I was confronted with an armored personnel carrier and armed agents, reminiscent of a scene that tragically ended the life of Fred Hampton years before. I felt laser beams targeting me, convinced they were about to kill me. Fortunately, I made it downstairs without incident. However, my wife faced a drone as she opened the door, and both of us were quickly handcuffed. Confusion reigned as we demanded answers, only to be told of an impending indictment involving a Russian national, with our names somehow involved. They conducted a thorough search, seizing electronics and employing forceful tactics like battering rams and flashbang grenades. Similar raids were simultaneously carried out elsewhere, disrupting communities and instilling fear. Now 3 Americans, Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville, face a possible 15 years in prison, charged as Russian agents. Their trial is set to begin on September 3rd. Tucker Carlson has spoken up about the case, as have many others. It is a blatant example of the government moving to crush economic development and free speech by accusing community organizers and advocates of economic empowerment of being foreign agents due to their statements about Ukraine. The way Julian Assange has been brutally tortured just for giving a platform to those who would leak the dark secrets of the deep state reveals how little Western leaders truly believe their rhetoric about democracy and freedom. The way January 6th protesters have been sentenced to astronomical amounts of time in prison for an event that was clearly arranged by more powerful forces, or the way students opposing Israeli crimes are facing expulsion and police brutality, all reveal what the agenda of the big monopolies and their government truly is. They have a vision for a high-tech dark ages, abolishing our freedom to preserve their profits as they march humanity toward a new world war. We must resist this scheme with all our might as we come to understand the roots of the crisis. And on the back last page, we have a picture of the Uhuru house, the house that got raided. And then the next section is called The Road to Freedom is Abundance. The woke ideology being utilized to rally young people to push for destruction is not standard or classical Marxism. It has very little in common with what was carried out by Stalin, Mao, Castro, or other Marxist-Leninist political leaders in the 20th century. Stalin mobilized the Soviet people to rapidly build and industrialize. The communist governments of the 20th century were all focused on increasing productive forces, raising living standards, building universities, and modernizing their countries. Whatever shortcomings they had, and it cannot be denied, aside from a few outliers like Pol Pot, communism has been a pro-growth movement. In fact, the vision of the higher stage of communism laid out by Marx is very much a post-scarcity society in which growth has zoomed to higher levels than ever before. Marx wrote in Critique of the Goethe Program, "Right can never be higher than the economic structure of society and its cultural development conditioned thereby. In a higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished, after labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want, after the productive forces have also increased with the all-around development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety, and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. A society in which labor becomes life's prime want, meaning that technology has increased to the point that people only work because they want to. A society where the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. This is the ultimate pro-growth vision. The breakdown of inequality, as Marx envisioned it, was not intended to be forced, but rather to come about as the all-around expansion of human productivity. This is what was behind Deng Xiaoping's famous statement, "Poverty is not socialism, but to be rich is glorious." You cannot create equality with willpower or force. The basis of oppression, enforced social hierarchies, and state power is scarcity. The road to freedom is abundance and economic expansion. And history has shown us this. Human rights did not appear out of nowhere. The reason talk of the rights of man did not arise until Europe in the 1500s is not because humans were just evil until that point. It was with a new level of economic development that a new level of freedom could be realized. The rise of capitalism was a great advance over feudalism, just as feudalism was a great advance over slavery. Human beings are constantly marching toward a higher plane of development, more efficiently forcing the environment to serve us, expanding our population and living standards. As we advance our technology, we constantly reinvent our social systems. As society becomes more abundant, the population increases as we live longer and we become more free. Separating human rights from economic development is one of the biggest deceptions of the Western liberal order. It frames freedom as a question of abstract morality, completely disregarding the conditions in which states function and are created and the social contracts are forged. Western leaders impose crippling sanctions on countries, justifying it with rhetoric about how the peoples of the targeted countries are having their human rights violated. Does it not occur to U.S. leaders that a lack of development, a lack of foreign trade, is itself a big factor in human rights being restricted? How do Western leaders expect a society to become more free if its ability to decrease poverty and to develop is cut off? Next section, where did woke come from? Wokeism is the result of a sinister project of manipulating politics that started with the intelligence agencies. The CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program began in the 1950s. The U.S. government began coordinating with Rockefeller think tanks and the Ford Foundation to reinvent the political left and separate it from economic questions. And we got a picture of the Congress for Cultural Freedom program. I'll read you the caption. It says, during the 1950s, the CIA began reinventing leftist politics with its Congress for Cultural Freedom program. The Frankfurt School and the academic postmodernism trace their roots back to efforts to subvert genuine socialist movements. Wokeism, the CIA funded magazines like Encounter and Partisan Review and brought us the Frankfurt School, a new brand commonly called cultural Marxism. The focus of this new brand was not on mobilizing the working class to seize control of the means of production and raise productive forces, but instead demonizing the bulk of the population as a tyrannical, ignorant mob, celebrating nonconformity. Adorno's authoritarian personality, Marcuse's one-dimensional man, and Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem have nothing to do with popular movements that built labor unions and fought against colonialism. These are elitist screeds of a middle class that sees the bulk of the population with contempt and fear and seeks to control them. The striving of the people to see their living standards increase and not have big bankers rip them off and loot the economy is deemed fascism. Wokeism, with its shrill contempt for the bulk of the population and its pessimistic view of the future, takes elements of Trotskyism, the French Revolution's guillotine bloodlust, the natural rebelliousness of teenagers, and it synthesizes it into a deadly cocktail for breaking people psychologically and helping set the stage for the low-wage, degrowth police state Wall Street and London are looking to set up. The sinister role of Zionism cannot be ignored either. While Marxists call for Jewish people to merge and assimilate with the rest of the working class and strive for a socialist society free of bigotry and discrimination of any kind, Zionism maintained that Jews were a special elite group that could never fit in with European civilization and needed their own state. Zionism is the original anti-populism. It was Lenin who once described it as the spirit of the ghetto. The call for Jews to exist as a separate group with a separate state. The way Israel is given billions of American taxpayer dollars each year, loads of free weapons and protection from the United States as it shocks the world with criminal actions in Gaza, fits in with the overall dark degrowth vision of the dying imperialist system. Wokeism and the corresponding economic philosophy of degrowth is a reinvention of fascist economics. As the Nazis rebooted Germany's economy temporarily with military spending and the creation of a slave labor underclass, the woke element and Silicon Valley elites are putting that message on blast and want to save their system from a crisis of overproduction by attempting to grind backward the wheels of history. It is a hopeless endeavor that can only be temporarily successful, coming at a massive cost in terms of basic humanity. Many American people dislike wokeism and its pessimistic dark message, and it appears that as anti-woke blowback brews among the working class, the ruling elite are trying to manipulate these sentiments as well. Even though many people who voted for Trump because they wanted to stop, even though many people voted for Trump because he said he would stop American involvement in foreign wars, Trump supporters are being manipulated and channeled into supporting heavy-handed repression of college protesters who want to end U.S. support for Israel. The idea that wokeism is some big conspiracy from China, not from the ultra-rich on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, is being pushed very hard in conservative circles. Anyone who has been to China, Russia, Vietnam, Cuba, Iran, Venezuela, or any of the anti-imperialist countries knows that their ideology and way of living in resistance to the dying global order of Western bankers has nothing in common with the pessimistic woke trend. This is being intentionally distorted by pro-war and pro-Israel conservatives, a toxic anti-woke brand that pushes survival of the fittest market individualism and lies to justify regime change wars is likely to grow more prominent in the coming years. This must be opposed and exposed for the deception that it is. And then we have a picture of the Chinese port. The port of Qinzhou has been built using the growth mindset of the government of China. So what can be done? We need a society where growth is promoted. We need a society where human creativity and brilliance are unleashed, not stifled and restrained. We need a society where the economy is rationally organized to ensure constant growth. 21st century socialism, the socialist-oriented market economy of Vietnam, or socialism with Chinese characteristics are adjustments. They are not the old Soviet model. They have plenty of room for tech developers, entrepreneurs, and innovators. In fact, the state goes out of its way to subsidize and promote the middle-class layer of independent creators. The strength of socialism in Nicaragua has been the micro-entrepreneurship program, enabling thousands of people to start their own businesses, launch their own cooperatives, and be subsidized in doing so to make the country wealthier overall. The difference between capitalism and socialism is not the role of the government. State ownership and taxation exist in all societies to some degree or other. Socialism is not the redistribution of wealth. All governments tax and spend to some degree or other. Some capitalist societies like Saudi Arabia and Singapore have a huge amount of state oversight and control of the economy. Others, like the United States, have a tradition of a more laissez-faire approach. The question of socialism or capitalism is rooted in the purpose for which the economy is organized. Friedrich Engels stated that under capitalism, the means of production only function, as preliminary transformation into capital. Marx spoke of the anarchy of production. Mao Zedong described capitalism as a system of profits in command. Capitalism is an economy where the drive of owners to make profit dictates economic activity. Socialism is when society overall controls the means of production to ensure that growth is not restricted. Socialism is when a government of action leads a well-organized population to organize the economy and control it so that growth is constant. On the front page, we've got a picture here. China has been pushing the boundaries of fission and fusion by pursuing the growth of nuclear power, the growth that nuclear power would unlock. The creation of a government of action in the United States would fulfill the American Revolution. The very basis of the War of Independence was the desire for an economy that was not simply a trading hub in the British sea-based empire of plunder. The American people wanted their own economy. They wanted westward expansion. They wanted growth. The Civil War continued this battle as the Confederate slaveocracy, which banned looms and discouraged technological development, sought to maintain a primitive agrarian economy that could supply cheap cotton to the British textile monopolies. Abraham Lincoln led a coalition of small farmers, industrialists, labor unionists, abolitionists, and slave revolutionaries like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass to smash the plantation system and its Wall Street allies. The U.S. Civil War was the Second American Revolution. And the Republican Party newspaper of New York City, the New York Tribune, hired Karl Marx as its London correspondent. Marx wrote glowing articles about Lincoln, the single-minded son of the working class, and communist August Willich rose up to the rank of brigadier general. It should be noted that the U.S. Civil War and the American Revolution itself were both preceded by mass episodes of spiritual rebirth. The first and second Great Awakenings were explosions of Christian revivalism that called for the country to turn around, repent from its ways, and recommit itself to principles of equality and justice. And we have the famous mural of John Brown. John Brown fought for the freedom of his fellow countrymen on the Kansas frontier. And we have the 4-point plan. The Center for Political Innovation puts forward a 4-point economic plan to restore the U.S. economy. 1, a mass program to rebuild our country. Hire the unemployed and put them to work rebuilding crumbling roads, bridges, schools, and hospitals. Construct high-speed railways, new universities, new power plants, and give the country an overall tech upgrade to let innovation flourish. 2, public control of our natural resources. The oil, gas, coal, and timber of America. The natural wealth flowing from our country's soil should be utilized to make the country overall wealthier, not to enrich Wall Street firms. Utilizing our natural resources to fund the public budget would take the burden of taxation off the population. 3, public control of banking and canceling debt. A national bank, as well as a state and local banks, should have a monopoly on credit and lend money strategically as part of an overall power to expand living standards and production. The debt that hangs over the U.S. economy as a curse must be lifted. The printing of money should be handled by the public, not the Federal Reserve rip-off system. 4, an economic bill of rights similar to that proposed by Roosevelt in his final State of the Union address. To ensure a strong economy in the United States, the labor power of every person must be utilized. Healthcare must be available to all. Quality education must be provided. This shouldn't be seen as a handout or a charity, but rather as an investment in the nation. It is human labor and human creativity that are the sources of all wealth and expansion, and human beings must be properly cultivated to make a more prosperous country. We believe in growth. A new economy is rising around the world in China, Russia, Vietnam, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, and other countries that continue to resist the all-out war drive against them from Wall Street. Growth is also the priority. Too many people exist in a dark, pessimistic state of being, left behind by a society that has no place for them. In our high-tech world, the strengths of every individual can be utilized to make the world more beautiful. The narrow limits and artificial restrictions imposed by the dominion of ultra-monopolists must be broken. China is not our enemy. Our enemy is an outdated, irrational system where the chaos of the market takes precedence over humanity's intrinsic need and drive to expand to greater heights. A new world beyond imperialism, where countries trade with each other on the basis of win-win cooperation, and all humanity marches toward a world without scarcity or state coercion, can be realized. And here we have a picture of CPI members marching. Peace with Russia, peace with China, no police state, no World War III. The Center for Political Innovation recently led the U.S. delegation to the World Youth Festival in Sochi, Russia. At the gathering, Russian President Putin said the following: "So we are all born equal, but the question is, do we grow and develop under equal conditions? The answer is, unfortunately, not. This is the greatest injustice of the world today. If you ask me what can be done for everybody to live and grow under equal conditions, unlocking their talents for the benefit of their loved ones, their family, and their country, and perhaps humanity as a whole, I do not know. But what I do know for certain is that we must all strive for it. Only by striving for it will we make the world more transparent, just, democratic, sustainable, balanced, and safe. Let us oppose war. Let us oppose state repression and attacks on our civil liberties. Let us demand a government of action that fights for working families. Let us work to build greater abundance and greater freedom than has ever before been imagined." Signed, the members of the Center for Political Innovation. And from there, we have a nice picture of Comrade Tyler leading the Pledge of Unity, and we have the CPI Pledge of Unity. "We pledge that we shall remember this unity, forged at the end of the Second World War, not only today, this week, this year, but always. Until we have built the world we have dreamed of and fought for, we pledge ourselves to build the unity of the people of the world, all races, all colors, all nationalities, all beliefs, to eliminate all traces of fascism from the earth, to build a deep and sincere international friendship among the peoples of the world, to keep a just, lasting peace, to eliminate want, frustration, and enforced idleness. We have come to confirm the unity of all the people of the world and salute our comrades who have died and pledge our word that skillful hands, keen brains, and bold enthusiasm shall never more be wasted in war." That is the entire Do You Believe in Growth pamphlet. And I am more than excited to distribute hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of this at the Libertarian Convention. And I hope that this is just the first of many more printings that we do. I want this pamphlet in the hands of as many people as possible. That's what I want. And I'm really happy and really proud of our organization that we published this. And we are about to go to a place where we will put it in the hands of thousands of people who need to hear it. I am proud of our organization. I'm proud of what we have built. I'm proud of everything we do. So, yeah, if you would like to help offset some of the cost of the printing of the pamphlet, you can always send a contribution, and a number of people already have, via Cash App to Caleb Maupin 22. You know, you can cash at me at Caleb Moppin 22. I am looking forward to getting thousands and thousands more of these printed and thousands of these into people's hands. I'm thinking about all the people from the Libertarian Party that are in the Libertarian Party of Idaho and the Libertarian Party of Kansas and the Libertarian Party of New Mexico who are going to be there and randomly see me or Peter or Tristan or one of us this weekend and get this and probably not even open it until they get on the plane home. And they'll open this and go, wait, what? And that is my goal. This was designed to make people think. People who are against the low-wage police state, people who are against the drive for a new world war, people who want to protect their civil liberties, people who don't get along with the woke thing. They see something off about the woke thing. This is designed to get into their hands and show them the way forward. So thank you, CPI. And thank you, everyone who worked so hard to make this happen so quickly. And I can't wait to get this in thousands of people's hands this summer. I'm thinking we're going to republish it for the DNC. We're going to republish it for the RNC. We are going to republish this for every gathering for the NATO summit in DC. We are going to get this in thousands of people's hands. This is what people need to hear. This is what people need to hear. I am proud of this pamphlet. I am proud of this organization. And on that note, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. And after we do the roll call, I will answer people's super chat, and then I'm going to bed because I am exhausted. I am utterly exhausted. It's a long day, and I got a long day tomorrow. I'm heading to the city early, and Mark Jones in Utica, New York. You always manage to be first, Mark. That's cool. Bob in Troy, New York. Tyler in Missouri. Also, Tyler on page. What page are you on, Tyler? Tyler's also on page 40. So there you go. Gonza in Argentina. Rachel in Wyndham, Georgia. Alex Rickle in Oregon. Zach Bunch in Richmond, Virginia. Megan in Kansas City, Missouri. Sergio in Phoenix, Arizona. Santa Ana, California. Nick is the real name. Enoch, Australia. Cyborg Ninja in Florida. Charlie at the Chicago Greyhound Station. Mariah in North Carolina. Happy Thursday. Get some sleep. Carl Payne in Oregon. Great work on the pamphlet, comrade. Great work to you. We accomplished something special. Mosen in Denver. Empire State, Washington. Carson in Northern California Delta. John McCarthy in Chicago. Patch in Arizona. Jenny is also tired in Cincinnati. Earl representing rural. Roe Grant in California. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Welcome. Mosen in Denver. Welcome. Kieran in London. Welcome, Kieran. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Welcome. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Dustin Schlesinger in Cleveland. Welcome, Dustin. Andrew in Argentina. Welcome, Andrew. So good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. It's been a wild day, and I got another wild day tomorrow and a wilder day on Saturday. Trump is coming to the Libertarian Convention. My credentials are approved for Trump. I'm going to see Trump. Albert in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Matt John in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Not Albert. I don't know why I thought your name was Albert. Mistake. So there you go. Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. All right. So now I don't know why StreamYard is not, doing what it's supposed to do, but I'm scrolling up so I can put the super chats on the screen. And we're going to start answering these super chats. And if you got more super chats, now is the time. How was the Holodomor myth concocted? Well, James, you got to be careful how you talk about that. I wouldn't even use the term Holodomor myth because that sounds a lot like Holocaust denial. All right. And they try, even the name Holodomor, it sounds like Holocaust, right? And even the allegations are completely different. We all know what Hitler did. He rounded up people on the basis of their race, religion, ethnicity, put them on trains, took them to places, and gassed them to death. No one has ever accused Stalin or the Soviet government of doing anything remotely like that, right? Even if you listen to the most extreme allegations, there was a famine, there were these prison camps called gulags, there were no gas chambers in the gulags. Most people left the gulags. Most people in the gulags were there for regular crimes, not political things. So the whole thing is just malarkey. But I mean, the first thing you need to say to anyone who brings up Holodomor is you need to say, wait a second. There were famines all the time before the Soviet Union. All the time they had famines. There were famines in the 19 teens. There were famines in the early 1900s. There were famines in the 1890s. There were famines in the 1880s. And who are the people who built a modern farming system in Russia? Who mechanized agriculture? Who brought tractors to Russia? Well, that was the communists. So how is a famine happening along the way as they did that? Make them responsible. That's the first thing. Second thing, you asked me how did this story develop? Well, it's worth pointing out that there was indeed a famine in the early 1930s in Ukraine, and no one denies that. And it was awful. It was horrible. And in response to that famine, there was rioting where the poor peasants would go and lynch the middle class peasants, the kulaks, who owned their own farms because they would hoard their grain, etc. And in response to that famine and people getting really, really angry because they had, they were hungry and going and killing kulaks, etc., Stalin rapidly moved the Red Army in, and they created the collective farm system. And, they had to do something, and it was that collective farm system that created an effective food system in the USSR from there forward. It was awful. It was bad. And hindsight is 2020. Maybe the Soviet government should have managed agricultural. Trotsky has this whole thing of like, first they were promoting private farming, peasant, enrich yourself. And then they zigged, they collectivized very rapidly. It was sloppy. It was bad policy. That's all fair game, right? If you want to say the Soviet government could have done it gradually, which Mao did, right? Mao did collectivization much more gradually. And different communist governments in the world have kind of learned from the experience of the Soviet collectivization, and they've kind of done it more gradually. They haven't zigged and zagged the same way because no one had ever done what the Soviet Union had done. But that said, the idea that the famine that happened in Ukraine in the 1930s, that also happened in Moldova, that also happened in parts of Russia, that happened all over the country. There were food shortages, not just in Ukraine. The idea that happened because Stalin was sitting up in the Kremlin going, I hate Ukraine and I will oppress Ukrainians because I am evil. Mwahahaha. Stalin wasn't Russian. He was Georgian. Did you know that? Stalin was not ethnically Russian. He was ethnically Georgian. And Stalin built the world's largest power plant, the Dnieper Dam, in Ukraine. And in fact, the areas that were hardest hit by the famine in Ukraine are the areas that broke with Ukraine recently and joined with Russia. And they tend to be areas where the Communist Party in Ukraine had a huge amount of support. And the Soviet Union went out of its way to create a written language of Ukrainian. The Soviet Union expanded Ukrainian territory. Lenin created the borders of modern Ukraine. Stalin expanded them. And then Khrushchev expanded them even further and gave Crimea to Ukraine. So this idea that the Soviet Union was trying to genocide Ukraine is utter bullshit. If you're trying to genocide a people, you don't create a national language, a written language for them. You don't go out of their way to cultivate their national language. If you're trying to genocide a people, you don't build huge power plants and electrify their region. You're trying to genocide a people, you don't expand their national territory bigger and bigger and bigger. The whole Ukrainian nationalist narrative is utter bullshit. It's complete and utter bullshit. The Soviet Union has more to do with creating and promoting the Ukrainian national identity than any other government in history. They promoted the Ukrainian written national language. They expanded Ukraine's territory. They industrialized Ukraine. They built power. They electrified Ukraine. They built hospitals all over Ukraine. I mean, if you're trying to genocide a people, you don't build the world's biggest power plant in their country. If you're trying to genocide a people, you don't promote their language everywhere, right? The whole Ukrainian nationalist narrative is just complete and utter bullshit. Okay? And it was invented, I must add, by Nazis, right? The Nazis were trying to get various people in the Soviet Union to fight on their side during World War II. They found Chechen Muslims who were angry at communism or whatever, and they created a Chechen Muslim insurgency. And they found Trotskyites, and they funded Trotskyism, and they had Trotskyite broadcasts. And they also found a guy named Stepan Bandera, and they funded and promoted Ukrainian nationalism. And it was about creating a group of people in Ukraine who would fight for the Nazis during the war. And they made up this whole narrative about, you know, Ukraine is just so oppressed by the Soviet Union. No, the Soviet Union, one of its weaknesses was it was obsessed with oppressed nationalities, right? And they even had, they had a House of Nationalities. They had their Supreme Soviet, and then they had the House of Nationalities, where every single nationality got one vote. They were obsessed with different nationalities. And Putin and a lot of Russians think that that is actually a weakness of the Soviet Union. It may have helped, lead to the downfall of the USSR. But the idea that they were trying to suppress Ukrainians or other nationalities, I mean, the first, I guess the second major leader of Russia was not a Russian. The second major leader of the Soviet Union was not a Russian. He was a Georgian named Stalin. Khrushchev was Ukrainian. Did you know that? Khrushchev was Ukrainian. I mean, these people don't know what they're talking about. But anyway, that's the first thing. All right, first super chat. Boom, answered. Oh, wait, there is a Rumble rant. I need to answer that first. Please explain how the COVID relief bill helped the rich. As an aside, I own my small farm and 17K COVID loan was not forgiven and I'm charged interest. Well, yeah, it's been widely reported, Rachel, that the COVID relief bill, that money was eaten up by Jeff Bezos. That money was eaten up by Walmart. That money was eaten up by all the big corporations. It was written and it was promoted as if it was going to bail out small business owners, but it wasn't. It absolutely was not. It was very much a bailout for the big corporations that were already making out like bandits. I mean, Amazon stayed open and all the other stores closed. Walmart stayed open. All the smaller stores closed. It was the lower level capitalists, small farmers, independent store owners. They got crushed during the pandemic. And it was the big monopolies that secured their power. And that's, again, people say, well, Caleb, how could capitalists want degrowth? If you're an ultra monopoly, degrowth is great because it reduces the level and it puts all your competitors out of business, right? It's just like how Obama dropped the oil prices in 2014, right? In 2014, Barack Obama and Saudi Arabia teamed up and they arranged a global oil price drop. People say, well, Caleb, why would the oil companies do that? Why would Saudi Arabia do that? They lose money. They already have a big share of the market. And so they arranged for the price to go down and it crushes all their competitors, and then they raise the price back up again. It's what Walmart always does. Monopolists use degrowth to secure their monopoly. Walmart, what does Walmart do? It goes to a town, and it drops its prices, and it puts all the other stores out of business. And then once all those stores are gone, shoots the prices right back up. It's a classic monopolistic scheme, and that's what they did during COVID, right? They put all the, they froze the economy. They crushed certain stores and they froze the economy, and it was really, really bad for the economy. And all the small businesses went under, and then they turned the economy back on, and Amazon and Walmart, and they made out like bandits, right? And here in New York City, a lot of the city property was bought up by Silicon Valley. So there you go. There you go, folks. Just explaining how these things work, right? Because there's a lot of confusion about this, right? Some of these things are not obvious. They're not as obvious on the surface, but you have to explain them. And yeah, that's what happened, Rachel. And again, yeah, you owned your farm. You never got anything for it. But Jeff Bezos, who didn't need it because the pandemic allowed him to completely operate, he, on the other hand, he got great. He made out like a bandit. And you'll notice a lot of the Trump supporting companies, they're the ones that lost out. I mean, a company that supports Donald Trump, Hobby Lobby, right? All the Hobby Lobby stores had to close down during the pandemic, right? All of them, right? Now, Hobby Lobby, they're evangelical Christians. They're against gay marriage. There's been boycotts, etc. But it's just, it's a craft store. They all had to close down. But Walmart, which didn't support Trump, which, gave all of its financial backing to the Stop Trump movement, they stayed open. And that's when you start talking about the lower levels of capital, the rich, the ultra rich versus the lower levels of capital. That's really the divide between the Trump and the anti-Trump crowd. However, I think at this point, things have gotten so bad. I deal with all these monopolistic competitors selling my flowers. At this point, I think things have gotten so bad, though, that there's a section of the monopolists that have made a deal with Trump. I think Trump is going to be back in office pretty soon. And I expect, unless he's really got a lot up his sleeve, I think it's going to be worse. Honestly, I think it'll be worse than his first term. Unfortunately, because it looks to me like the ruling class has made some kind of deal with Trump because they need him, because people are angry and Bidenomics isn't working and people are tired of woke. Woke is no longer floating people's boat. And so that is my prediction. All right. Next super chat question. Can I trust in economic classes to be legit? I've heard they tend to dismiss Marxism as pseudoscience. Yes and no. I mean, first of all, you're in Argentina, and Argentina has a very different history and different tradition. So I don't even know how it is in Argentina. In the United States, academic economists are a little bit better. They're a little bit better because they tend to totally debunk the whole libertarian thing. There is a lot of money in promoting neoliberal Austrian school free market economics. And so people with degrees in economics, they get hired by think tanks, they get paid to write books and all of that. But among academic economists, where it's not about what books you get paid and what book deals you get, it's about like actually showing, your method. Academic economists tend to be more what they call Keynesian. So academic economists will critique the neoliberal free market, stuff. And so that, in my experience, the main thing though about academic economists, aside from a few outliers like Richard Wolff, like Michael Hudson, most of them just won't touch Marxism, right? Because it's not safe, right? I mean, and it's the same with history. I had history professors in college, and I would raise my hand in class and say, didn't the Soviet Union rapidly industrialize and wipe out illiteracy and, create a superpower overnight? And they would say, well, yeah, that's technically true. But I what we focus on here is this famine in Ukraine, and I mean, they know the truth, but you get in trouble for emphasizing the truth. It's a lie through emphasis. All right. So academic economists have largely been told, just don't touch Marxism. Just don't touch it. Just don't touch it, or you'll get in trouble. And, I mean, a lot of them don't know what overproduction is. They think overproduction is just too much stuff being produced, which is not what it is. But that's what it sounds like, right? Overproduction means you're producing too much. That's not what it is, right? It's that people don't have the ability to buy back what they produce, and you have poverty created by abundance. That's a really, really important point. It's especially important in light of AI and technological advancement. Most academic economists don't even know what that means. Right? You will, however, they will acknowledge there's, John Maynard Keynes, he coined the concept of underconsumption, and that you need the government to hire people. You need the government to dump money into the economy to keep people consuming. That's, Keynesian economics. And so you'll get that. And, you will get a lot of academic economists if they're working at a university and they're not, they're not just getting paid by some think tank. If they're working at a university, they'll tell you that Milton Friedman is full of shit. They'll tell you that Alan Greenspan and all of them are flim-flam men who don't know what they're talking about. And they'll argue that, they'll argue for the government to tax private companies. They'll argue for national health care. They'll talk about how the welfare state is necessary. They'll talk about how, American agribusiness depends on food stamps. Conservatives tell you, oh, food stamps is just a handout for these lazy poor people. Well, actually, one of the biggest supporters of food stamps is Kraft. The people who make the cheap McDonald's or the cheap mac and cheese. Kraft Food Corporation, they actually sponsored in the 1990s. There was talk of cutting food stamps, and Kraft sponsored a huge rally in Washington, D.C., demanding, that food stamps be kept. Did you know that? Nelson Peary talks about it in his book, The Future is Up to Us. And why? Why did Kraft sponsor this huge protest for food stamps? Because they would lose millions of dollars if they cut off food stamps, because poor people buy their food and poor people would not buy their food, right? Lots of stuff gets sold that would not get sold if they didn't do it, right? And, if you're a neoliberal economist, if you believe in libertarian flim-flam, which is just austerity propaganda, that's all it is, right? If you believe in libertarian flim-flam, you'd say, oh, no, food stamps aren't necessary. If these people need to eat, the market will create a way for them to eat, blah, 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 Well, most academic economists will go, no, actually, food stamps is really good for the American economy because it keeps the farming sector in business. Libertarianism is a form of academic flim-flam that it's everywhere because there's a lot of money behind it. Right? The idea that we should just deregulate all the big corporations, the idea that poor people are just inferior, they're just less intelligent than the superior rich, and that, that if you just privatize everything, you'll have economic productivity. That is a big part. That's a big delusion, right? And libertarians will say the dumbest things about economics. I've seen libertarians say there would never be a monopoly if it wasn't for the government. How can you say that, right? Do you know how much the government goes out of its way to break apart monopolies, right? I mean, the market depends on the government breaking apart monopolies in order to make sure there's still competition. The idea that there would never be a monopoly if it wasn't for the government, that's ridiculous. Monopolies tend to pretty quickly happen in the market if you don't have antitrust laws. I mean, I worked in the insurance field. I learned about all kinds of crazy laws in the insurance business to make sure that you don't form a monopoly. Like the idea that, if we just had no rules, there would never be a monopoly. That is so not true. I mean, and having worked in the private sector, in the insurance field, I will tell you that the government very, very much is needed to prevent monopolies. And the capitalists themselves are the ones that need them to do it, because if you get a monopoly, the economy comes to a grinding halt. It's called monopolistic stagnation. So there you go. All righty. Next, I got to scroll up. You guys are great. I love you guys. I love you guys. Thanks for letting me read that entire pamphlet. I'm very proud of it, and I'm really excited to get it into people's hands. Okay. All right. Next super chat question. When the leader of Iran died, and I saw those people mourning his passing, it reminded me of when Kim Jong-il died. The videos of people crying. I remember how the media claimed it was a personality cult, or they were forced to cry. First of all, Korean culture is a little bit different than American culture, right? Public displays of sadness and crying are much more accepted in Korea, right? Hugging is not. In Korea, you do not hug people in public. It's weird. It's inappropriate. But people breaking into tears and crying in a very public displayed way, that is acceptable in Korean culture. And that doesn't culturally translate. So they show you videos of people crying and sobbing, and they're like, oh my God, this is insane. But no, it's just a cultural difference, right? I could tell you a lot of stories about that, but culturally, Koreans are much more visibly emotional, right? Other Asian folks, it's different. Different Asian countries have different cultures, but in South Korea, in North Korea, public emotional displays, Korean culture, that's okay. Affection is not. Hugging, men and women don't hug. Women and men definitely don't hug. It's, people don't hug in public, but, here in America, you see your best bud someplace, you give him a hug. You go to Korea and you see your best bud and you hug him in public, and people are going to be like, whoa, that's a little weird, buddy. What are you doing there? Different culture. Right? Here in America, if you're sad about something and you're in front of a group of people and you just start crying and you just start sobbing in front of everybody, people are going to think, is this person having a breakdown? Is he crazy? But in Korea, if the leader of your country, the president, dies, you're almost expected to do that, right? And these are cultural differences, okay? But you'll notice, first they claim nobody in Iran was mourning the guy, and now they're saying, well, they're all mourning him because they're forced to, right? These kind, it's it's like if you go out of your way to interpret everything that happens in a negative light, you can do that, right? It's the eye of the beholder, as they say. I mean, if you decide somebody's bad, no matter what they do, right? You can interpret it in the wrong way. The guy can go and visit a bunch of sick children in the hospital and give them millions of dollars to pay for their treatment, and they'll say he's a creepy pedophile hanging out at hospitals and bribing families to be okay with it. That's how these people are. The internet is full of people that do that, right? No matter what the person does, they interpret it in some weird, gross, disgusting way. And that's just, it is what it is. Do you think that growth and protecting the environment and reducing pollution can coexist? Yes, I do. I do think that. And in fact, I would argue that I am not I'm not ready to say climate change isn't real, because I'm not a scientist. And a lot of scientists are saying it. I know scientists have been wrong before, but I am not qualified to argue with them. And I know that there have been anti-climate change things that have been debunked and stuff. I'm not gonna deny climate change, because I don't see the point in it. I think that growth necessitates getting beyond fossil fuels, right? If climate change is caused by fossil fuels, we obviously need to grow to fusion. We need to grow by developing nuclear power. We need to get beyond fossil fuels. And the idea that degrowth is the way to save the environment is ridiculous, because you're not going to degrow. And this is, I was arguing about this on Twitter earlier, and I need to stay off of Twitter but it's like, whenever the degrowth thing comes up, people are like, oh my God, we have a finite planet. We have limited resources. And it's like, yes, that's true. And if we were still burning coal, or if we were still burning wood to heat our homes, if we were still heating our homes with firewood and charcoal, we would have deforested the planet years ago. That's true. There's a limited amount of trees out there. So what did we do, right? When the population was expanding and we were burning wood to heat our homes, did we just degrow? Did we just, start exterminating the population? No, we started burning coal, and now we burn natural gas, and we have electrical heating. Right? Human beings are constantly reinventing their relationship with nature. And interestingly, it used to be that environmentalists were some of the biggest supporters of nuclear power. And it wasn't until big oil started funding the environmental movement that changed. Interesting fact. But yeah, I am for environmentalism in the sense that we need to use resources in a long-term strategic way. Right. And that, look, at one point, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught on fire because it was so polluted. That's awful. And the Clean Air Act made a big difference. It used to be the air around the country, especially in industrial cities, was much more polluted. Right. I am not against environmentalism per se, but environmentalism should be done for man. Okay. Environmentalism is not done because air and water and trees and little chipmunks are sacred. It's done because if we don't use our resources strategically, we'll hurt ourselves. We'll breathe poisoned air. We'll have the Cuyahoga River catch on fire. There's a need to regulate industry. There's a need to regulate and control the use of resources so we don't deforest. So, but the idea that resources themselves need to just exist, the idea that growth is somehow bad, the idea that humanity itself is a problem, that I don't agree with, right? And I am in favor of environmentalism as long as it is done in the interests of humanity, as long as it is humanity being more strategic in the way we force the environment to serve us. I'm for it, right? And it's necessary. And I think under socialism, it'll be much more rational, right? Because we'll be able to have a central plan. So we're going to say, well, we're going to use this many, we're going to use this much coal, we're going to use this much timber, and we'll be able to do it strategically with a long-term vision rather than just capitalists operating for short-term gain. So the idea of being strategic and how we use our resources and growth walk hand in hand. The idea that human beings existing and using resources is a problem, the idea that growth is bad, the idea that we're environmentalists not because we need to be more strategic in how we use our resources, but because nature is sacred and human beings are a cancer, and that's where you lose me. That's where you lose me, right? There you go. There you go. Right? There you go. All righty. Okay. There you go. Okay. Okay, what's next? What do we got next here? Is that all the super chats? Let me just keep scrolling. I think that might be all the super chats. Oh, no. Here's one. Why did anti-imperialist Iran side with American unipolarity at the UN today? Yeah, did they vote for the day to commemorate the massacre in Bosnia Herzegovina? Well, you have to remember, and this is important, that the anti-imperialists of Serbia, they were Christian, and that the people that were being backed by the United States, the ethnic Albanians in Kosovo and the Muslims in Bosnia Herzegovina, they're Muslims. And Iran is the Islamic Revolution. And Iran maintains that it has no national loyalties. The Islamic Revolution was not Persian, right? It was for all Muslims. And yeah, a lot of Muslims around the world, including a lot of Shia, they take the imperialist narrative on the former Yugoslavia. And I talked about that with Iranians, and I talked about that with Muslims. It's just a reality. A lot of the Muslims in the world that are very anti-imperialist on everything else when it comes to what happened in with the former Yugoslavia, they because it was Muslims that were fighting against Christians, because they view the West as being anti-Muslim, because they view the Christians as being European, they took the wrong position. And Saudi Arabia, did a lot of very, very effective propaganda around that issue. So, but yeah, I take the pro-Serbia, pro-Yugoslavia position, obviously. That doesn't mean, let me reemphasize, and I said this when I was on, we're not saying that innocent people weren't killed. We're not downplaying or trying to make it sound like we don't care that innocent people were killed. Right? Innocent people were killed. A lot of people got hurt. What happened in 1995, July 11th, 1995 was awful. It was horrendous. But it's being used to promote a narrative that blames, that blames the former Yugoslavia, that blames Serbs, demonizes Serbs. The Nazis killed millions of people, 27 million people in the former Soviet Union, and they killed, millions of people in Yugoslavia. So why is there no national, international day of reflection on that genocide? Why not? It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. So there you go. All right, folks. Well, normally I would keep going, but I am at the end of my rope. It's been a long day. It's going to be a long day tomorrow and a long day on Saturday. I probably won't be streaming again until Monday. Slim chance I'll do it on Sunday, but it's been a long day. So, tomorrow I'm going to be going all day, and Saturday I'm going to be going all day, and Sunday I'll be resting. Got church in the morning, and then I'll probably just kind of come home and rest and try to figure out where I'm at, maybe edit my video from the Libertarian Convention. I intend to do a lot of interviews at the Libertarian Convention, in addition to the leaflet, pamphlet distribution and stuff. So, Monday we'll be back. Slim chance we'll be back before then, but you never know. But shout out to everyone who made this pamphlet happen. A number of people have sent me contributions in the last couple of days. Thank you. And it's not too late, too. If you want to help offset the cost of this, it was not cheap to get the car to go all the way out to Queens, to load it up, to, but if you can, want to offset the cost of this pamphlet that we printed, I still would appreciate it. It would make my life easier. Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App. You can still help, get this pamphlet, help offset the costs. We hope to do a lot more printings. But thank you to everyone who made this happen. This needs to get in people's hands. And I'm really, really happy that this is out there. And I'm really excited to start distributing this. So thank you. And on that note, I'm going to put on the closing music.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.